You know, the video game industry is an interesting way to express art in ways that have never been achieved elsewhere before. You can see stuff that may reflect upon you that helps to shape the kind of person that you are today. Plus, it can be a great way to escape the harsh reality of life itself. Over the last 2 decades, society has adapted for how that we consume media today, because prior to the 21st century, the way that we got the news was all through controlled outlets and big corporations that were paid to talk about certain topics. These days, though, with how fast information spreads, though, we can now see it from many different perspectives, so that way they're no longer controlled by these big corporations and we can just take in stuff at face value. But with how much information spreads online, it can be hard to consider what should be known as truth. That way we could just spread this to our future generations so that way we can continue to prevent human mistakes. But what if I told you that back in November of 2001, a video game would come out and it would propose a fix for this and even predicted for how our society would turn today? Back on September 3rd, 1998, Metal Gear Solid was released for the PlayStation, directed, produced, and written by well-known game developer Hideo Kojima. The game became a huge success and was way ahead of any other game at the time since it introduced cinematic storytelling with Hollywood-level voice acting. It also helped that the story, as well as the rest of the series as a whole, does tie in with real-world events and locations. Its stealth gameplay helped make the genre a household name, and boss fights that all use new methods to defeat them so no encounter is ever the same. Not to mention it did some gameplay innovations that still have never been replicated to this day. These innovations include where the player had to physically interact with the console in order to proceed on with the game, and even mentioning what else you have been playing beforehand.
I can see into your mind. So, you like Suikoden. So, you like Azure Dreams? You like Castlevania, don't you?
To say that Metal Gear Solid was a big success for the video game industry should be an understatement. Games at the time, when it came to their story, they would always be told through like text boxes, or the times when they would have voice acting. The developers would just go out in the streets, find whatever first people they saw just wandering around, take them into a recording booth, and just the first session of lines they had with them, they would just call it good from there.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Yes, but I can't see very well.
How about going down to check by yourself?
It's me, Chris.
Is that you, Rebecca?
It's thanks to this game that some of the best stories that have been told through other forms of media, they can be told through video games as well. For the next game, we would hope we would get everything that we loved out of the first game and continue to play as the awesome character that was Solid Snake. Along with gaining a huge fan base, selling 7 million copies worldwide, and leaving the story off a cliffhanger ending, a sequel was inevitable.
Yes, thank you. Goodbye, Mr. President.
Over the next 3 years, Kojima and his team would be developing the next entry, and a year later, in 1999, Sony would reveal the PlayStation 2 that instantly made fans eager to get their hands on it, coming off the success of its predecessor. And the day finally came where we saw footage of the next Metal Gear game. We saw Snake infiltrating heavily guarded areas with new movesets, a new game engine that was leagues better than the one used in the previous game. A release date would be set for November 13th, 2001. And all this was the start of something that would later on be revealed in the game's eventual release. Though also consider that we didn't have platforms like YouTube or any other social media platform so we could share our excitement for all of these upcoming releases. Though for Metal Gear Solid 2's case, Konami was pushing advertisements heavily with the game, and rightfully so due to the success of the previous game. Fans were going to buy it just by the name alone, and Konami went as far as releasing VHS tapes that showed off footage of the game itself. A game called Zone of the Enders would come out 8 months before the release of Metal Gear Solid 2, and it was also produced by Hideo Kojima. The main reason that this game sold so well was due to the fact that it included a demo disc of Metal Gear Solid 2 8 months before the game was supposed to come out. So you combine this along with the VHS tapes that Konami mailed out to people, and with the first game's cliffhanger ending, it is safe to say Metal Gear Solid 2 was definitely one of the most hyped games of all time, or even back then, one of the most hyped entertainment products ever. So finally, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty is released, and initially, it's everything that fans wanted it to be. We get to see Snake pulling off some slick moves, we get to see Otacon return assisting Snake this time around, and the game quickly goes over all the new gameplay mechanics that gives the player the idea that this sequel is one that improves on every aspect of the first game. With a good first impression, it's safe to say that our expectations were met for this game. So Snake has infiltrated the tanker in the Manhattan Harbor to find a new Metal Gear prototype under the codename Ray, and to leak pictures of it online. Though another group is after Ray with the returning character Ocelot as a member, who suddenly betrays the group and steals Ray for himself, which then follows is seriously one of the most intense cutscenes of all time. Seriously, imagine seeing this just suddenly burst out of a sinking tanker. Ocelot then makes his escape with Ray, and we do see Snake come out of the sinking tanker, but he is dragged down with the ship, leaving his fate unknown. This whole opening was one that could take players around an hour to complete, and already it is just throwing these insane moments at the player that just keeps us wanting to see the whole thing through. So you would think that the rest of the game would continue to be like this, right? Well, that depends on who you ask. We are greeted with a new opening, but this time we have a new character named Raiden as he infiltrates a facility off the coast of Manhattan called the Big Shell, which has been taken over by a terrorist group called Dead Cell and have taken hostages including the President of the United States and demanding a ransom of $30 billion. Then if it's not met, Dead Cell will destroy the Big Shell and in return will cause a big natural disaster. Though you may notice, everything so far has sounded pretty similar to the first game. Even Colonel Campbell, who was Snake's commander in the first game, returns as Ryan's commander as well. From here on out, the game starts introducing some mechanics that we already learned in the tanker chapter, and even the Colonel just gives us constant calls that is just re-explaining stuff that we already learned before. It just doesn't make sense how that after the tanker chapter, the game just feels the need to re-explain all this stuff that we already learned before, that this just totally breaks up the pacing of the game unless there was a legit purpose behind all of it. And also for the rest of the game, it just starts to feel very similar to the first game, only this time we're now playing as Raiden, of course. And this was something that back then was not looked well upon amongst the fan base. Because before the game came out, we had no idea that Raiden was going to be a thing. He's nowhere to be seen on the front of the box or on the back of the box. He was never shown in any of the game's commercials or ads. And even today, for like some of the game's re-releases, we wouldn't blame you still for not knowing that Raiden was a thing, because he still barely has much of a presence on the re-releases for their box arts. What's interesting is that for the game's marketing, it only showed the first 10% of the game. and the rest was all stuff that we never seen before. Then this sudden bait and switch on the fan base that they aren't getting what they asked for and their expectations were played with.
They played us like a damn fiddle!
Despite what some fans thought during the game's initial release, it was still a very well-made game from start to finish, and still to this day the best-selling game in the whole franchise with around 7 million copies sold. Fans were upset for the most part with what they got, and when it came to Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, most people skipped out on it until word of mouth said that it's more of what you would have wanted from the first game. So why would Kojima make Metal Gear Solid 2 the way it was, where it betrayed fan expectations? This series was on its way to become one of the most successful and loved in the industry. Don't get me wrong, the series did continue to become very successful. Though if you look at franchises like Terminator, Alien, Resident Evil, these were all franchises that for their first entries, they were big successes and gained a huge following. Then their sequels expanded upon the formula and gave fans what they wanted and more. So why didn't Metal Gear Solid 2 do the same thing despite it being a well-made game? The answer lies within what Kojima wanted to achieve with the game's narrative. We learned that Raiden is a character that is supposed to represent the player, or should I say Metal Gear fans. He's a big fan of Snake for how much he is looked at as a legendary hero. He went through VR training, which is related to the ones that we went through in Metal Gear Solid VR missions. Then towards the very end of the game, in this arena, it looks very familiar to a level from VR missions that even Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2's strategy guide mentions that this area looks very familiar. Midway through the plant chapter, we learn that Snake is alive, and him and Otacon explain to us what happened during the tanker chapter, and this is where we see moments that we never experienced. Snake does land on the tanker, as we saw, but we do see him later on wielding a FAMAS assault rifle, something that we never got, and also moments where Snake is fighting enemy soldiers in rooms that weren't possible for us. Does this imply that what we played was just Raiden experienced the tanker incident through VR? And do keep in mind, Raiden is supposed to represent us, the player, and take into consideration what Snake said is that the whole VR simulation was not 100% accurate.
I've gone through VR training of the tanker mission before.
Yeah? Well, I doubt it accurately simulates the events of that mission.
What's to say if what we saw was real, or even what we saw in those scenes there was real for the whole tanker incident? The game does continue on with this meta-narrative that we eventually learn the truth of who really runs the United States. Take a listen to this exchange between the President and Raiden.
But why stoop to terrorism?
I wanted absolute power.
But you're the President. You have power.
No. I'm just a figurehead.
What?
I don't have any control. The real power is in the Patriots' hands.
The Patriots?
The truth behind this country. I'm not surprised you've never heard of them. Very few are aware of their existence, even among those with code word clearance.
Huh?
Politics, the military, the economy, they control it all. They even choose who becomes president. Putting it simply, the Patriots rule this country.
No.
Hard to believe, isn't it? But it's the truth. The space defense, income tax reduction, and national missile defense programs. Every policy that's been credited to me was actually done according to their instructions.
Space defense was initiated by Congress.
That's what the Patriots want the country to believe. It's all a show. Democracy is just a filler for textbooks. Think about it. Do you actually believe that public opinion influences the government?
No.
This country is shaped and controlled as the Patriots see fit.
Isn't it interesting how they state if public opinion really does matter for this country, which I'm sure is something that we all can relate to for us being citizens here. Though of course not saying that this is indeed how our government is, but it's just fun to speculate for the way that the game presents this whole idea. Although the US is not the only thing that the Patriots have control over. Take a listen to this exchange between Emma and Raiden.
The President said that arsenal gear was the Patriots' key to supremacy.
That's as good a description as any.
What exactly is it?
It's a massive data processing system capable of controlling information on a global scale.
A data processing system?
That's right. The system's a social device for maintaining the Patriots' control.
You've lost me.
Well, in this day and age, information emerges from every direction and is freely distributed. A variety of information gathered by servers employing the latest in high-speed communication networks and P2P technology is rapidly circulated to individuals. In fact, the speed of this circulation process is accelerating on an almost daily basis. The Patriots seem to be afraid of this development. Apparently, they believe that their role will shift from dominant to dominated.
Huh?
Let me give you an example. You're aware of Solid Snake's anti-Metal Gear activities, aren't you?
Yeah, I know a little about it.
Well, that's just a small sample of uncontrolled information. I can guarantee you the Patriots did not want Solid Snake's name publicized. Now, look at it like this. Political scandal, corporate corruption, up until now, the Patriots have managed to keep a lid on these and other self-serving events. But with their existing data processing system, they're no longer able to effectively control the flow of information generated at the individual level. With the newly created system, they can fully regulate digital information. High-level information can be categorized in stages, given clearance levels, and deleted as necessary, never to be seen by the public. By deleting such information, the Patriots can shape the course of history as they see fit.
Somebody's bound to catch on.
No, the memory capacity, not to mention the lifespan of the average individual, is extremely limited. On the other hand, digital information lasts virtually forever. It doesn't deteriorate.
So how ironic is it with the amount of social media platforms that we have today that information just spreads so rapidly and in such an uncontrolled manner? So to recap, the Patriots is a group of 12 men who truly rule over the United States. They staged the tanker incident so they can get Snake and Otacon to be known online as terrorists, making the internet believe Snake was behind it. Then the big shell was constructed so it could hide the development of Arsenal gear, which holds the AI core of GW, which controls the flow of information online. Of course, this all sounds like censorship, but later on we learn what their real goal is. Once we infiltrate Arsenal, we notice that the game starts to throw stuff that makes us question everything around us. The game's code starts appearing through floors, walls, and objects, and now the kernel starts talking to us like this.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
What are you talking about?
Honestly though, you have played the game for a long time. Don't you have anything else to do with your time? I hear it's amazing when the famous purple stuffed worm in Flapjaw Space with the tuning fork does a raw blink on Harry Carey Rock. I need scissors. 61.
At this point, the game is just falling apart with fourth wall breaks that just creeps us out. Even Raiden is close to just losing his mind with everything that's being revealed to him, and questions who the Colonel really is.
Raiden, about this Colonel of yours. I found out where he is.
Where?
Inside Arsenal.
What?
I've checked out all the possibilities, but I keep coming back to Arsenal. It isn't a relay point, it's the origin of the signal. And the encryption protocol it uses is exactly the same as that of Arsenal's AI, the so-called GW.
What the hell does this mean?
I think it means you've been talking to an AI.
That's impossible.
The Colonel probably isn't GW per se. GW was most likely stimulating cortical activity in the dormant part of your brain through signal manipulation of your own nanomachines. The Colonel is, in part, your own creation, cobbled together from expectations and experience.
That's crazy!
But it's probably the truth. The virus may be starting to affect GW, which would explain the Colonel's behavior.
It was all an illusion? Everything I've done so far?
Raiden.
Snake, what's happening around here?
I don't know. What I do know is that you're standing right here in front of me. Not an illusion. Flesh and blood.
Huh?
It's your call. You can drop this if you want.
No, I can't do that. Let's go.
So this whole time we were following orders from an AI, and this makes us think, are we taking orders for someone else, or why are we even doing it in the first place? Though imagine being in Raiden's position, he is questioning if everything he has done should be considered real, or even if his girlfriend is real. though Snake is making sure that his sanity is still intact, and in a way this can make you think that Snake is a guardian angel to Raiden, to make sure that he keeps reminding Raiden of exactly who he is. This in return can reflect how fans of Metal Gear view Snake as a legendary hero that keeps pushing through no matter the circumstances.
Raiden, they've got Rose.
What?
Rose is being held in the holds.
It's a trap.
Help! Rose!
Raiden, get a grip.
But Snake...
It's a trap. Since the Colonel doesn't exist, there's no way he can take Rose hostage.
Yeah, you're right.
I am right.
Okay. Does Rose exist?
Don't be weird. She's your...
What if I've never really met her?
What?
If the Colonel is something that I partly dreamt up, then everything I remember about her could be...
Don't jump to conclusions.
You and Otacon are the ones that say the Colonel never existed.
Raiden!
Later we get captured by the main antagonist Solidus, and he explains to us his goals, that he wants to free the US from the Patriots so we truly live in a free country. And honestly, it's reasonable for how he explains it. Of course his actions calls into question, but we can see where he's coming from. Then Ocelot comes in and reveals to us how we all have been played, including Solidus. Everything was staged to recreate the Shadow Moses incident from the first game to prove that anybody could become Solid Snake, which Raiden or we, the player, fulfilled. We are then contacted by the AI Colonel, who further explains into this and also explains the Patriots' ultimate goal.
Raiden, are you receiving? We're still here.
How's that possible? The AI was destroyed!
Only GW. How can anyone hope to eliminate us? As long as this nation exists, so will we.
Cut the crap! If you're immortal, why would you take away individual freedoms and censor the net?
Jack, don't be silly.
Don't you know that our plans have your interests, not ours, in mind?
What?
Jack, listen carefully, like a good boy.
The mapping of the human genome was completed early this century. As a result, the evolutionary log of the human race lay open to us.
We started with genetic engineering, and in the end, we succeeded in digitizing life itself.
But there are things not covered by genetic information.
What do you mean?
Human memories, ideas, culture, history.
Genes don't contain any record of human history.
Is it something that should not be passed on? Should that information be left at the mercy of nature?
We've always kept records of our lives, through words, pictures, symbols, from tablets to books.
But not all the information was inherited by later generations. A small percentage of the whole was selected and processed, then passed on. Not unlike genes, really.
That's what history is, Jack.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
What they are talking about is how natural selection works for memes, which by definition means an idea or fact that is passed on to an individual, similar to how genes work. With a meme, if it holds enough relevance to a topic, it's likely that it will get passed on to future generations. However, with the internet age, because information comes up all the time from any individual, this can get shared online so fast that it becomes difficult to curate what's most necessary to the discussion. But what the AI proposes is because they aren't affected by human error and emotions, they can decide what is most necessary to pass on that won't be considered biased information. Of course, this does violate free speech with censorship, which we all should never advocate for, but the AI explains how we abuse our use of freedom of speech. And it's the way people will have beliefs that have been proven to be false information, and yet they refuse to see the other side of the argument. We see this type of behavior all over the internet today with what's called echo chambers, that we can't accept truths because it will emotionally hurt us, that we come to realize that we were taught is all false information.
You exercise your right to freedom, and this is the result. All rhetoric to avoid conflict and protect each other from hurt. The untested truths, spun by different interests, continue to churn and accumulate in the sandbox of political correctness and value systems.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
We're trying to stop that from happening.
It's our responsibility as rulers. Just as in genetics, unnecessary information and memory must be filtered out to stimulate the evolution of the species.
Raiden then argues that he isn't like any of these bias groups and that he still has a form of self, though the AI argues if it's even beliefs that he came up with himself. To reflect on us, did you believe in something that you thought of yourself? Or did you base it off of a political figurehead who supposedly told you is truth? If it's something from an outside source, that can mean that a part of your personality is shaped on those beliefs. Then at that point, is that part of you truly considered a sense of self? In the game, Raiden proves this mentality because he thought he was saving the world from a terrorist activity and would live up to Solid Snake, only to realize he was going to succeed as long as he continued to obey orders from the AI, and everything he thought he was doing on his own free will was all fiction. We took a part in this exercise because we wanted to be a hero like Snake, but all of it was staged from the start, proving that there is a lack of self in Raiden.
You lack the qualifications to exercise free will.
That's not true. I have the right.
Does something like a self exist inside of you?
That which you call self serves as nothing more than a mask to cover your own being.
In this era of ready-made truths, self is just something used to preserve those positive emotions that you occasionally feel.
Another possibility is that self is a concept you conveniently borrowed under the logic that would endow you with some sense of strength.
That's crap!
Is it? Would you prefer that someone else tell you? All right then. Explain it to him.
Jack, you're simply the best, and you got there all by yourself.
In the end, we have no choice but to finish the mission by killing Solidus, or else if Raiden dies, so does a child he's sworn to protect. But this makes the Patriots enslave the United States for the way the AI sees it, instead of the US living a truly free country that Solidus fought for. By the time this video is uploaded, this game is exactly 20 years old. And it's crazy to think that back when it initially came out, how different it was looked at compared to how we look at it today. That we thought we were just betrayed from Kojima of what we wanted out of the sequel to the first game. But now, looking at just the stuff this game predicted, just gives us a sense of how we are as a society today. And the fact this game predicted all of it is just crazy to think about, honestly. After 2 decades, this game's narrative is one that proved how our lives would turn to with the rise of fake news and social media. It took the fan base many years after the game's release to understand what it all meant, until we got to where the issues have become apparent to us. Though what can we do to resolve it without resorting to what the AI suggested, which includes censorship? Well, Snake explains the best thing that we can do for ourselves.
There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality. Most of what they call real is actually fiction. What you think you see is only as real as your brain tells you it is.
Then, what am I supposed to believe in? What am I going to leave behind when I'm through?
We can tell other people about having faith. What we had faith in. What we found important enough to fight for. It's not whether you were right or wrong, but how much faith you were willing to have. That decides the future. The Patriots are a kind of ongoing fiction too, come to think of it. Listen, don't obsess over words so much. Find the meaning behind the words, then decide. You can find your own name. And your own future.
Decide for myself?
And whatever you choose will be you.
I don't know if I can.
I know you didn't have much in terms of choices this time. But everything you felt, thought about during this mission is yours. And what you decide to do with them is your choice.
You mean start over?
Yeah, a clean slate, a new name, new memories. Choose your own legacy. It's for you to decide. It's up to you.